was for the Bach bicentennial, or the 250th anniversary, I guess. Yes, 250th anniversary of Johann Sebastian Bach. And so we have the Bach Passions, and Helmut Rilling of Stuttgart commissioned you for a St. Mark Passion. Was he expecting anything like this piece?
Not at all, on one hand. On the other hand, he was very open from the very beginning, from the moment he asked me to write a passion, because my first answer to him was no. He explained to me the project. He wanted one of the passions to come from Latin America, and I said, look, most composers in Latin America are Christian. Why do you ask a Jewish composer? And he said, I think you can have a vision that is different, and as long as you use the text, anything is allowed. So I did it. But then he came to I think one of the last rehearsals in Stuttgart, and he was a little scared. He asked Maria Guinan, who conducted the premiere, is this a passion? And then he actually, the beautiful thing is that he understood something that I didn't understand myself in writing, that one of the most important questions in the Saint Mark Passion, because I focused a lot in repetition of certain figures, words, is the word why. And he said, well, in a way, the Passion, the big question in the Passion is why, at least from the human level. So he was really supportive, and I owe him the trajectory of my life, really, by him encouraging me to overcome this fear of writing the Passion, and for supporting me in doing something so different than what was expected.
From the initial no to the final product, there must have been some gestation of what you were thinking about with this work. What changed as you were working with the piece?
The process was pretty long, because he asked me to write it in '96 and the premiere was in 2000. But 2 years were of total paralysis and fear, because after I said yes, I said,
Are you crazy?
Yeah. But then I said, look, the first thing I need to do is to really study the New Testament and to divest the text and the story from the history of the Passion as of the use of the Passion through the centuries, many times as an instrument of anti-Semitism. So it's not like writing a symphony or a sonata. It's a piece that, a kind of piece that requires a lot of questioning. Also, the questioning of perhaps accepting a vision that is not the vision that you grew up with. So that's why I think for 2 years I only studied and feared, and then I realized that the breakthrough was remembering a painting of Rembrandt that my great-grandmother had the reproduction in her kitchen, and always struck me. It was the Jeremiah lamenting the fall of Jerusalem. And I saw the face of Jeremiah, very old, in that painting, and the face of my great-grandmother were the same, you know. And then I remember that Rembrandt was not Jewish. He lived among the Jews, and he portrayed that Jewish soul more deeply than any Jewish painter. And the difference in talent aside between me and him, the situation was the same. I grew up Jewish among Christians, so I thought, I might bring some perspective, some truth that was not told when a Passion was written by a Christian composer. So that gave me the courage.
And there's an element of drama in and above the Latin American elements that is central to your portrayal of this work.
Yeah, well, I think the drama is not from my Jewish part, but from my Latin American part. I think it's more the a temperament that we have that doesn't need sometimes the it's not Lutheran, so to speak. It's not okay, text, commentary, meditation. The meditation is through the action, even through dancing. The whole African influence, the whole native influence. There is the idea that dance is spiritual, which I think Bach also understood. Otherwise, he wouldn't have written his suites, you know. But rather than commentary, is a work of compression and ritualization. And by means of ritual, which is something that also Stravinsky did, by means of ritual, meaning emerges, but without a need for sermons.
Okay. So we have elements of dancing, we have costumes as well, yes?
Yeah, not, I mean, just, costumes in the same sense that when an orchestra plays also has costumes, right? I mean, it's simply is something sacred. There is a great influence of the Yoruba tradition that intermixed with the Catholicism, and black is a bad luck color for this tradition, so we decided to use white and purple. I didn't actually, it was the chorus that proposed, and there were many things in the Passion that were collective decisions. The garments, also the shells, which have great symbolic sacred meaning. Many of the movements of the choreography, I had original ideas of what should be done, but it was decided with the dancers and Maria. So a lot of things, some transitions even between numbers just happened, almost like in jazz. So there were moments that are absolutely written, you know, the numbers themselves, but a lot of the magic of the piece is in the transitions, and many of them just happened.
Okay.
Sometimes by sometimes because the chorus sometimes is 1, 2, or 3. So sometimes the motions of the chorus brought music, which I think also in opera happens a lot. That you need for a scene change, you need an interlude,
Right.
And that to me was fascinating.
Now, how important is the visual aspect of this piece now?
I think the visual aspect is important, but I think even without, like, how would I put it? I saw it, the last time was done at Carnegie Hall this year, and the chorus was humongous. It was like, I don't know, I forget how many, but it was filled with very young people from New York City, and so there was no room almost for movement,
yeah.
And but there was a little bit, and it still was very powerful, but definitely is. I think all of my music has much more impact when you experience it live than on recording. But I think a lot of music is like that.
You have instrumentalists outside the normal realm of the symphony orchestra. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. The truth is that the commission was very well suited for me. I don't work very well with pre-established ensembles. So Reeling was very open, and he said, the only thing we had agreed was that we will use the chorus from Venezuela, with whom I had worked in a previous piece, and I loved them. And then I said, I'm going to start the orchestra, instead of starting from
Bach Passion Orchestra.
Yeah, whatever, Bach Passion or Verdi Requiem, you know. I will start from zero. I will start from the berimbau, which is this fabulous native Brazilian instrument. It's just a bow with a string and a stone and a gourd, and sounds like a Jew's harp. So I started with that, and I built from 1 like by addition rather than by having already an organism. So then my next decision was to have to think of the music as a cross, just rhythm and chant. So everything else would be a function, harmony, colors, but it would be a piece that was very stark in a way, even if the piece is now very, at times, joyous and colorful. One of the decisions I made in terms of the orchestration was to not have instruments that cook, that melt, that make pastels. Like, for instance, eliminate violas, clarinet, woodwinds, etc. I came up with the concept of an orchestra ceviche. The ceviche is when you cook the fish just with lemon juice.
So primary colors.
Yeah, but you don't even use fire. So it's like the acid of the lemon juice cooks the fish, and to me that was the story is so wrenching, and it happened in a place in which I lived in Jerusalem, and where the stones are white and the sun blasts you, and the stones. It's just like there is no respite, and I could feel just the thirst of Jesus after the first trial and being led, just. So I wanted an orchestra that would have that cruelty, that contrast of ceviche, and that's how it came. So berimbau, 2 trumpets, 2 trombones, Cuban guitar, piano, 1 bass, some violins and cellos, just to provide some connective tissue, and a lot of percussion. But the percussion all comes from 3 instruments, which are the 3 sacred drums from the Afro-Cuban sacred drums called batas. And then the idea was that all the other instruments would be almost like tonalities for different movements. You know how in a classical piece there is a harmonic journey. Here there was a rhythmic journey or changing of gears, and instrumental in terms of the percussion. So even if the percussion is very varied, I always focus on one tonality.
Okay. Key. Now, with the work, with the Passions of Bach, you have Christ generally as a baritone. You do not have the words of Christ in any single voice.
Right.
Why?
Why? Because the story is so well known. Even for me, that I didn't know it before writing it, I already knew it. That I had the idea. It's not my idea. One of the things that fascinated me from a great book by Gabriel Garcia Marquez called The Autumn of the Patriarch was that it was written in a collective monologue. So sometimes it's the people, sometimes it's the dictator, which is a very archetypal dictator, sometimes it's his concubines. So, and here it was the same. To me, really, if I think of Jesus in Latin America, I think Jesus is women in Latin America, because women have suffered the most, suffered all, loss of children, to violence, the poverty, everything. And then, especially in the country where I was born, in Argentina, they had the most courage. Like, for instance, in the 70s, when the mothers, the so-called mothers of Plaza de Mayo, whose children had been killed by the dictators, they started a silent going around the government plaza every Thursday, I think it was. And people scorned them, they were called crazies and demeaned, all a passion story. And they kept going, and every week more people joined, and eventually they undermined the dictatorship. So that's why most of the times in the Passion, Jesus is sung by a woman or women, but sometimes by a man. It's the message what matters to me, and not the person.
The Stuttgart premiere was a tremendous success, and when and how did the circumstances happen with the Boston premiere? Was it scheduled before the Stuttgart premiere?
When I was writing the piece, I met with Tony Fogg. I forget why. I think he said, "Let's have coffee." And so, and it was really interesting. So we had coffee. I had nothing written, basically. I had just like the idea of a Birnbaum and some ideas. And so we sat right here across this, what was to be Espresso Royale. I don't know if it's, I think they changed the name now.
Yeah, it's still
anyway,
there.
so
Yeah.
I remember that conversation because it kind of changed my life. And he said, "Oh, tell me a little bit." This is interesting. He said, "Goodbye." And then months passed, and I mean, we went to Stuttgart, we had the premiere, and then I went to swim to the place where I used to swim, and a guy says in the locker room, "Oh, so the Boston Symphony is doing your Passion." I say, "Wow, I didn't know." I mean, I truly learned in the locker room, and I realized that this is how Tony works. You know, it's an interesting thing that most people in his place promise a lot and then they do nothing. He doesn't promise anything and then things happen. And it was, of course, what could be more beautiful than to have your biggest piece that you have written up to that time in your city, in the city.
This is now your hometown. Yes.
Yeah, where I raised my children and where I love the orchestra. It's just beautiful. I will never forget that experience.
Any changes, thoughts since that Boston premiere? I mean, you've had scores of performances of the work since. Have you thought, well, maybe I should tinker with this a little bit?
No. No, most of the times I do tinker with pieces, but not with this one. You know, maybe little details or things that the musicians would suggest, or they, you know, there is also room, there are moments in which they can improvise and they like to do different things. But no, I also, it's been almost 14 years, so you know, when you're asking me all these questions, I remember, but it's almost as if somebody else wrote it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's interesting what happens after. I mean, you live in a piece very, very deeply, but then once the piece arrives to itself, which doesn't mean that it's perfect. It's not important, the perfection, but when it has a personality, you should not tinker with it because it's already what it is, and it's in the world. It belongs to the world. So I can tell you things, but it's almost as if a very, very good friend of mine had written it, and
So you are no longer the composer of the Passion.
Yeah, the last times I heard it, it was like I think I heard it very objectively, almost as if it's somebody else did it and said, you know.
Almost at the very same time you were writing this work, another person was writing an evening-long liturgical piece featuring Don Upshaw, and the premiere was in Europe. He was an American composer, and he was using Latin American aspects for this liturgical piece, and came up with an entirely different work.
Right.
And I'm thinking of John Adams El Nino. Did you guys ever compare notes either before or after?
No. I mean, I see John many times, but we did not talk. I mean, I love that piece very, very much. I think it's a very Handelian piece, no?
Yep.
And overwhelmingly beautiful and very much like he's you know, he's like a master of the orchestra and the big masses of voices and colors
And sound.
So mine, I always see John more like Handel or Verdi, and myself more like a Mussorgsky. I don't know if that makes sense to you, like more almost like finding my way step by step and doing things that are a little bit more oblique to what would be the central sensibility of the time. You know, what was in the 19th century, the Italian-German view, and compared to the Russian, and today the American, European, compared to the Latin American, you know.
Well, congratulations and welcome back, and it's going to be a great return to Boston.
Thank you. I'm very, very, very happy about this.